Hello and welcome back, and that is right. Today I want to talk about two very popular NAS software platforms. I want to talk about TrueNAS and Synology's DSM platform. I've talked about their respective hardware. I've even compared their respective hardware in the past. But today I want to talk about their softwares, what they can do, what they can't do, how they compare, and hopefully help you decide which one is the way you should be going forward with you and your data. Before we go any further, this is their respective login screens via the graphical user interface. They're on the web browser. So let's go ahead and log in and just see how quickly they take. So first up, let's go with the Synology, starting there. And there we are on the Synology desktop there. And of course, now we want to look at TrueNAS. Let's log in there. Arguably, TrueNAS was the quicker there of the two. We're not really going to be kind of stop watching these two programs, but I think it's going to be really interesting to compare Synology DSM platform with TrueNAS, taking advantage of an iSCSI NAS, a pre-built turnkey solution that's comparable, I would say, to NAS in a number of ways. And in today's video, we're going to go through design, we're going to go through control, we're going to go through storage, we're going to go through little bits of application, how the system works, security, and more, and see how both of these platforms provide a very similar level of user experience, but in a very different way. Now, having a look at these two systems here, it's worth mentioning a few disclaimers straight off the bat. First and foremost, the kind of split screen squished view you're seeing there on screen just above me there. This is the only way I can really show this to you while still keeping as much on screen as possible. If we were, for example, to scale one out more than the other, you can see that they both respond and reshape as we change between them. So normally the TrueNAS view there would have the grid boxes all in a kind of spread screen formation. Same goes if we spread that back onto the other side there and we bring the Synology back there. The Synology on the right hand side of the screen has a kind of desktop feeling there, as you would expect from, such as Mac OS, Android, even Windows as well. And straight away you can see a big distinction between these two brands. And now obviously TrueNAS there has always been a lot more technical, a lot more information is thrown at you early doors. Even if we scroll down there, we've got loads of information on the individual storage pools. We've got on our system information on the memory being utilized, the CPU utilization there. All of these boxes can open out into their own respective windows with loads of information that we'll talk about later on. And there's information on the system itself along with firmware updates and more. Now, on the Synology side of things, we can see that it takes advantage of a far more domestically relatable graphical user interface that's comparable to that of a desktop computer. We've got our desktop space here. We've got a start menu at the top that's got all of these different applications and services ready and available. It's worth highlighting that more than half of these are applications that I've installed manually, and we will talk about the App Center later on. On top of that, we do have information there on the screen with regards to resource consumption and a little bit more information about the health of the system, but by no means the detailed view that we've got there in TrueNAS. Now, these can be opened out quite significantly. We can even add further of these widgets here on screen. There's lots of different widgets we can install, lots of them available within the NAS platform there. And when we look at both of these, we can see that the Synology side is far less intimidating. It's got less being shouted at you immediately. If we bring those boxes there a little bit clearer to the top there. On top of that, we can also see, if we sort of go in there, we can look at the resource monitor. Now the resource monitor, as we can see there, gives us a little bit of information there. We can change it to have historical data there if we want, so it can store data over time. And again, if we do the same here on the TrueNAS side, and we will go into more detail later on the resource monitor, we can go into the CPU there, click on that box, and then we get a lot more information, far more, analytically presented there. And again, that information can be changed in how much we're seeing there. We can change different kinds of information. We can flick between whether we want to see historical information immediately, going back into the system of the history of the device. We can also drop down into different areas of monitoring. So again, far more technical information straight away. And another thing I want to talk about in terms of the user interfaces here between the two platforms is the fact that how much you can reach immediately. So in the case of the Synology, if I want to drill down in some of the more technical aspects, I want to change some of the settings, have a look at some of the back-end choices, I've got to go into the control panel there, and then from there it opens up into a new window. Again, do bear in mind we are doing this kind of squeezed split screen view here. But from here we can have a look at different options, file indexing, user creation, find out more about the information of the system. We can kind of drill down into some of the hardware there, change some of the settings there in the background. And again, we drill down menu into menu. It's still quite, straightforward and pretty intuitive, but there's still 2 or 3 layers generally between the desktop of DSM-7 and any of the configuration options at any one time. Now, if we look at TrueNAS, we can see TrueNAS at all times has that side menu. So if we wanted to drill into the system options, we click System, and there they all are. Now, again, of course, we are still clicking, we are still going layers down, but again, it's all kind of immediately accessible from that desktop in a kind of grab immediate way. It is more intimidating, there's no avoiding that. There's more information being thrown at you, the end user. And for a free to download application, this is still incredibly impressive, but there's no avoiding that it definitely has a steeper learning curve and a little bit more friction, even with these helpful guide tips that I've talked about in my TrueNAS reviews. It's still a lot more intimidating about the information being thrown at you immediately compared with the more familiar kind of window opening control panel of DSM-7, far more based on that of desktops that you may be used to already using. Another thing I want to touch on, something I did raise when I was speaking with IX Systems on the TrueNAS Q&A, is to do with a search functionality. Now, one of the things I'm so used to when using turnkey kind of NAS solutions, and recommend this to people, is when I say to them, to solve that problem, you need to do X, Y, Z. I've said to most users, if you can't find an item, go to the top right of the screen, select the search functionality there, and search for it. So if you want to be able to search for the ability to look at my backups, just search for the word backup. It will find different instances of files you have, guides, and applications that come under that. Same goes for any setting that you want to go for. Perhaps rsync, if you want to change the settings, activate an rsync application, or find help and guidance there. Now, on the TrueNAS side of things, there isn't a search functionality like that. You can go into the guide section there, which will open out into a new tab, and that new tab will give you more information from TrueNAS website. On top of that, if you want to use different tasks and services, you can go into the plugin section and search there, but there isn't a kind of catch-all search functionality there immediately available to you from the desktop, which again does lean quite heavily into the DSM platform, trying to be as user-friendly as possible. And a lot of money has been spent by them in R&D and design on that user experience, that UX there on the graphical user interface. Now, TrueNAS is trying to let you do so much more in terms of customization, configuration, and accessibility while staying safe. But it's very hard to maintain that level and not end up being more technical overall. Now, I'm looking at my notes here. I can see that another thing that is quite unique to TrueNAS is the customization of the user interface. For those that aren't aware, again, if you go into the system options there, you can change a lot of the configuration you can see there on screen. So the layout of things, the color spectrum, a lot of these things can be changed by the end user. If you go into the cog at the top of the screen, you can scroll down to preferences, and from preferences you can create a brand new theme that changes the color palette, changes a lot of the icons. You can even change the original logo that you can see there on screen from TrueNAS over to the original logo, which was FreeNAS, for those that aren't aware. And again, you can do lots of different changes there in terms of fonts and colors and stuff like that, all of which can be changed. Now, on the DSM-7 side of things, there is an element of customization, but a more classical sense. So, for example, you'd go into the cog and personal at the top, and then from here, you can go ahead and start changing the background, for example, add a new wallpaper there. You can go ahead and change the location of certain icons around the screen, whether you want the time or date. You can also change icon sizes. Again, these are things that are going to be far more familiar to desktop PC and Mac OS users. Indeed, if you go into the control panel, you can go ahead and change some of the login portal options there and change what the end user will see based on different applications they access with. And again, a lot of that can be changed quite easily within this access panel there, and it's all more graphical. And again, that's something we're going to keep coming back to when comparing TrueNAS and DSM from Synology. Now, an element of TrueNAS I didn't touch on during my TrueNAS review, but someone else highlighted it, and apparently this has been a long-running thing for a lot of TrueNAS users, and I'm so used to this being available in turnkey kind of off-the-shelf solutions from Synology and QNAP and more, that I didn't even realize it wasn't in TrueNAS. And no detriment to them for this. It's a very specific kind of user that will want this, but I do think it's been commented enough on online that I do think I should raise it, and that is file management. As a big surprise to me, I'm very surprised that on the TrueNAS system there doesn't seem to be an immediate way to access a file folder structure via the graphical user interface. Something that a lot of us, particularly domestic NAS users, kind of take for granted. The fact that I can access the files and folders here on my NAS via the web browser. I can go in, I can do everything from looking at photos to going ahead and accessing AI-powered photo recognition, something I'll touch on later on, play music, watch videos. And also, I can view files in their native fashion like this, in, file, folder, breadcrumb structure. And the same goes for if I want to create shared folders that I can share with other users online. And again, if you own a Synology, you'll kind of take for granted that you have this option. You may not even realize this isn't something readily available to everyone. And again, that goes down, if you choose to sharing a file online with users, creating a share link, or using a number of the tailored applications via your web browser for photos, music and video, and we'll touch on these more later, that allow you to access all of your data natively via the web browser. Now, in the case of TrueNAS, if you want to do similar to this, there are kind of ways to get close to that. So you can use a lot of the service structure there to create shared pathways to the structure of your data via a multitude of different protocol and network protocol settings there. Obviously, some of the early ones like map drives, SMB, iSCSI, targets and LUNs. Or you can go ahead and install plugins that will work with third-party software and allow you to interact with that data in native ways. Again, as mentioned, but still nevertheless, it is very difficult outside of traditional command line structure to access my data, my files and folder in a native, intuitive, graphical way. And I understand why TrueNAS doesn't do that. It's not really into that architecture and how they're displaying that software. Maybe this option is available in a different form via a third-party application. And again, if TrueNAS are watching this and IX systems, do let me know. But that's a big boom for domestic NASs there, particularly for users that just want to access the data there via the web browser. Yes, of course, you can access the content of your TrueNAS via native third-party applications for client tools that are completely compatible with the open source and API designed throughout architecture of TrueNAS, but there isn't really that file folder structure to the same degree that we've just seen there. And I think that's a big part of the design and customization difference between these two platforms here. Now, another thing I want to talk about that I touched on in my reviews between them is when you want to create multiple users, because these two platforms, although they allow multiple users to interact with them, they do it in slightly different ways. So in the case of TrueNAS, if you go into the Accounts tab at the top left, you can drill down and create multiple users very quickly on the fly there. You can go ahead and really customize their level of access to quite a high degree, not just names and emails and contact numbers, but from here you can really configure their privileges and access to the rest of the system. On top of that, you can go ahead and create rotational passwords. You can set up connections with Microsoft ASL accounts. You can, enable a lot of encryption methods directly connected with their account in it and change a lot of the password rules as well. And again, I've created multiple users, and those users can be funneled into multiple groups. And again, it's all quite technical, which, text-led, as you've seen there, but it's very, very possible. Now, on the Synology side of things, what it lacks in some of the more customizable options that TrueNAS has there, it makes up for in how you can upload or create groups faster and en masse. So, for example, I've got a few vague users there. I can go ahead and create a user. And that user from here, I can, again, give them names, passwords, that sort of thing. So give them a name, Alan, give them a password. Again, you can change the ruling on how secure you want that password to be. Again, you can go, oh, maybe I should make it so it actually matches. Go for it there. Once you've created that password, I think it's telling me off for not doing things, trying not to look at a key, my password, my keyboard even. And again, give them different group access, give them different application access, give them different tools and limitations of access to different users and groups. Again, different services access, and then finally, different network and file protocol quotas, and all of that being created quite easily there. And again, it can still be extended to groups too. Also from there, you can delegate their permissions. So for a brief period of time, you can choose for a user to become either a super user or a more limited user for a period of time. You can even upload mass users via CSVs and XLSs very quickly directly onto the system if you choose. And again, that's a nice little feature and you can also create bulks of users on the fly if you choose from existing ones. These are options that aren't readily available there on TrueNAS. What TrueNAS has is a tremendous scope for creating very bespoke and customized users, which again may be more, enterprise driven and more enterprise accepted. And maybe there are bulk user upgrades, and I talked about that with TrueNAS and IX Systems on their scale version of TrueNAS. But the Synology seems to have better bulk creation and kind of on-the-fly controls built into it. So that's kind of user control there. And overall, I think we can agree that in terms of user interface and control panel, that things are more intuitive and user-friendly on the Synology there, but there's always going to be a higher level of control, customization, and just tinkering and configuring built into TrueNAS there. Let's move on to our next section there, storage. Now, storage distinctions between these two platforms could not be clearer between them. It's one of the areas where there's an enormous degree of difference in what way they've chosen to go forward with their systems. Probably one of the biggest ones that you're all going to be aware of is the fact that TrueNAS utilizes the zettabyte file system known as ZFS for short, whereas Synology's platform involves the utilization of either ext4, which is quite an old school and well-regarded file system, and the alternative BTRFS or ButterFS, which again, some people don't feel has got a right amount of history and legacy behind it. It has a lot of advantages to it in terms of file self-healing and internal checksums and faster shared folder actions with against resource utilization, but we're going to drill more into that in just a moment. But as you can see here, because I'm using an IX system NAS, I'm able to view a lot of the individual drives there on screen. As you can see, the Synology there, I am using a DS920 there, so it's not really comparable in terms of the hardware we're talking about. The IX system NAS is about twice the price of the Synology one we're looking at here. But again, there are comparable devices. We are still talking about a 5+2 bay IX Systems TrueNAS versus a 4 bay Synology. But again, these are ones that we have currently available in the lab. But as you can see, even though these two screens look quite similar in terms of their overall kind of user interface there and what we can see on screen, I think it would be fairer to look at TrueNAS how storage more typically will be viewed. And that's by going into the storage manager here, where things are a lot more technical. Now, between the two of them, again, that word technical is going to keep coming up here. And if what you're interested in is far heavier information and real concise details on your storage and how to get the very most out of it and tweaking things to the best performance possible, then that screen there on the left from TrueNAS is probably the one that's going to be the most appealing to your eye there. From it, we've got access to the ZFS file system there. So that means we've created ZFS pools. We don't take advantage of a traditional volume layer. Within that, it takes advantage of data sets and creating smaller kind of VDEVs, which are kind of those compact areas of data there. So again, there is a wizard here to help guide you through creating a new storage pool or importing an existing storage pool if you choose. So creating a pool there. Again, all pretty straightforward. We'll give it a name. From there, we don't have I've already used up all the areas of data there, but it doesn't matter. I've got that little partition data there. And again, from there, you can choose what kind of storage container you want to use that VDEV, whether you want to utilize it for normal data caching, hot sparing, metadata utilization. And again, that leads us into fusion pools, where within TrueNAS you can create these combined areas of storage which can utilize different media types, and therefore when it's being accessed, data that can prioritize different kinds of media. So you want SSDs largely, particularly the NVMe SSDs, to take advantage of metadata storage and background INI storage, that sort of thing, where you want your larger storage there to deal with your bulkier sequential data and you know, the big wholesale backups there. So having that option there and how you want to choose it drop down is quite nice. Also, the system has a suggested layout option there that will look at your storage and kind of make recommendations. So if I had more drives readily accessible there, it would pull those and put them in the right places for me. Again, you can force things through. You can, if you choose to, kind of mix up drives there. You shouldn't really do that, but you can force it to do that if you choose. On top of that, you've got encryption built in there on the pool level. So lots of options there. And again, support of encryption in the TrueNAS system is far more customizable than it is on the Synology as well. I'm going to show you in a moment how deep encryption goes, at least as far as customized storage setup is on the Synology. But on the TrueNAS, there's an enormous degree of support across the board in terms of encryption on the TrueNAS platform, of where you want your encryption to be, whether it's on the VDEV or whether you want it on the entire pool, whether you want it on individual jails and containers, and also encryption across transfers and protocol as well. So again, although a lot of that is available on the Synology, not all of it is, as I go through. Obviously, we could talk about the subject of snapshots. Snapshot replication is available on the BTRFS file system, and I'm aware that I'm saying file system there, but just bear with me. Just, you know, let it go. Let's not be Peter pedantic about this. And although up to, I believe, 65K of snapshots is available in the right configuration on the Synology side, significantly more snapshots and significantly more customizable snapshots are available, unsurprisingly, on the TrueNAS platform there. And again, a lot of the advantages that may be afforded to the TrueNAS platform, again, we're talking deduplication, we're talking about enhanced compression there of data on the fly, we're talking about improved compression technique as well, and faster RAID building. All of these are afforded to TrueNAS thanks to that ZFS file system. Now, again, a lot of these things are available there on the storage manager from Synology. So from the Synology, for example, using BTRFS, we have the snapshots there already built into it there for much faster reclamation. Recovery on a timeline there. On top of that, we've also got fast RAID building. And fast RAID rebuilding. The RAID building is nowhere near as fast once you exceed the RAID 5 level, or SHR, on the Synology as it is with a RAIDZ or RAIDZ 2 or 3. But Synology's support of Synology Hybrid RAID, for those that aren't aware, which is a RAID configuration that lets you mix and match drives, is very desirable for many that look at the Synology platform. So on the face of it, a lot of people watching this, maybe you're an experienced TrueNAS user or just used NAS for a long time, you may wonder, why would a person mix and match drives? Surely any kind of RAID should have the same drives in utilization. Well, what if you have a RAID configuration that has, 4 drives in it, and all of those drives are 4 TB each? You've had it for a couple of years. Those drives are 5-year warranty drives, but you're running out of space. You might want to introduce bigger drives into your existing storage pool. Now, as time has worn on, the price of drives has come down, bigger capacities have become available. Consequently, you might want to go for bigger drives. Having an SHR allows you to migrate bigger drives in gradually over time and start to absorb and take advantage of that larger capacity that's afforded to you. Because in SHR, for redundancy purposes, it has to keep only 1 drive's worth of redundancy of the biggest drive available. Whereas in traditional RAID and RAIDZ, the system will class every single drive as the smallest available drive available. So if you put in a 1 TB drive and 4 4 TB drives, every drive will be classed as 1 TB. Now, that's a great thing for Synology users, but it has to be said, Synology do not offer SHR on their systems above a certain enterprise level, the XS series and above. So Synology have clearly at least highlighted and accepted that the performance level of SHR is still not up there with traditional RAID, and that's probably a very good reason why TrueNAS doesn't include a feature like that. But still, nonetheless, it's still a nice feature to have for many in the home, prosumer and SMB tiers. Now, I mentioned faster RAID rebuilds. Both the Synology and the QNAP platform take advantage of a not dissimilar RAID rebuild advantage. If we go in or go into the settings there, we can talk a little bit about fast repair from Synology. Now, both advanced repair and RAID rebuild within ZFS share a very similar advantage, and that is during a RAID rebuild process, they will look at the drives, which may have been 4 10 TB drives, but even if they're in, a 1 disk redundancy fault tolerance setup, say there's only 2 terabytes of data on there, fast repair from Synology and the traditional RAID rebuild of ZFS will only need to build the data that is on the area of data that exists. They'll only have to rebuild up to that 2 terabytes we've got and null the rest out. So that fast RAID rebuild is a great option to be available on both, but it's worth remembering that the ZFS platform, TrueNAS, not only will build RAIDs significantly faster, it will also, upon building those RAIDs, also support RAID resilvering, which is if a drive is accidentally removed or dropped for a moment, it can still recognize that that drive is part of the pool and reintroduce it in seconds or minutes. In the case of Synology, if you remove a drive and reinstall that drive or it drops, it will treat that drive and the whole RAID as degraded and have to rebuild and overwrite that drive, even though clearly the data is still on there. So a lot of similarities between them in terms of RAID configurations, but let's talk a little bit about that storage. We've already talked about the file station and file management there available on the Synology platform and not really being available on the TrueNAS platform there. But as I look at my notes, we can talk a little bit more about snapshots as well. So in the case of the Synology, with snapshots, again, snapshots are included. Snapshots are generally, if we go to create a brand new snapshot, we'd go into the file manager. We can go into a shared folder and create a new snapshot routine if we choose. Again, all of these things are pretty straightforward and all kind of readily and available to you, all within the system. And again, we can go into the snapshot manager, go in, start creating a brand new snapshot on one of those shared folders within the Synology. And then from there, we can see the folders that don't have snapshot snapshot options available. We can take a snapshot, call it Snappy1, and then create a brand new snapshot routine. And then as it creates that snapshot, we can then go ahead and give it a schedule for the snapshot. So we can go ahead and start that snapshot regularly at our own needs. Again, all of that is available in a slightly different way here on the TrueNAS platform. So if we want to create a brand new snapshot there, we can just choose the data set, so the location that we want to go ahead. So let's go with snapshot in somewhere random, like the pool 1. Go for it there. Give it a naming scheme. So obviously that goes to your attention 1, 2, 3, 4 moving forward. And how you want it to include the subcategories as well. So it's much faster and easier to create a snapshot there on TrueNAS. And remember, you can store significantly more snapshots there on the TrueNAS platform overall. Another area of storage distinction between these two platforms is to do with SSD support. Now, the Synology NAS platform supports starter SSDs. It also supports NVMe SSDs. And in the case of, say, this 920, it has two NVMe SSDs built into the base. However, the Synology system will only allow, and this applies to all Synologies at the time of recording, will only allow NVMe SSDs, that's that PCIe hyperfast SSD, to be used for caching only. That's their own SSDs and third-party SSDs such as the WD-RAID SN700 or the Seagate IronWolf 525. Whereas on the TrueNAS platform, NVMe SSDs, if you've built the hardware to have it, can be used for anything. They can be used for storage pools, flash storage. They can be used in those fusion pools. They can be used for caching, multi-tiered caching. They can be used for read and write caching. They can be used for just the metadata. They can be used in a multitude of different ways that aren't available on the Synology platform. So if you're thinking of creating your server for local or remote access and you want to use high performance SSD media, you may do better off with the TrueNAS platform. Synology have their own drives, they have their own SSDs and hard drives, and they have flash servers as well. But even now, to date, you can't use super fast NVMe SSDs for utilizing anything but caching. They have support of SATA flash stations there, and I do believe they support SAS-based SSDs as well. But again, those are custom solutions that start between £5,000 to £10,000 to £15,000. So again, some high price tags right there. Another thing I'll mention, we actually just talked about that with Synology drives. Some Synology systems above the XS tier are starting to have much more limited full compatibility with only their own hard drives. You may have heard the word Synology hard drive locking is being thrown around. That's kind of a messy term. What it means is some Synology systems will allow you to use WD-RAID and Seagate IronWolf drives and the like, but some of the features and services of the Synology platform won't be afforded to you. Also, Synology do state that although they will honour the hardware support and warranty of your hardware, if it turns out that utilising those third-party drives can be pointed at for the reason of hardware failure, that is to say that your drives, your Seagate hard drive you've purchased, have affected your Synology hardware to a point that it doesn't do the things that they said it would do, and you're saying it's not doing, then they state that they might use that as a reason not to support your warranty because they can't emulate it on their own premises. Now, of course, a lot of users are not going to be happy about that, and I think quite a few enterprise users, when they heard that, did make the jump over to TrueNAS because of TrueNAS's huge open source nature and custom build design. If you look at the IX systems, they arrive with WD storage media inside, but TrueNAS can be utilized with any of those storage platforms and any of those storage medias. So again, that's one of the reasons a lot of people might prefer the TrueNAS platform once you hit the XS tier overall. Overall, between them, I would also highlight the wider degree of encryption support that we talked about already within the TrueNAS area there. If we break down a little bit and have a little look at some of the options that are open to us, and when we look at the pool options, what we want to enable, what is open to us, whether we want to add new storage areas and more, TrueNAS gives you a lot of information in the storage area, but it's still incredibly technical and can be fantastically overwhelming for an early user. And Synology's simplicity there really cannot be overestimated in terms of if you're a new user and you don't know what to do. Indeed, if you've got a brand new hard drive, it's quite nice to know that when you're looking at what to do with your drive, you can go ahead and click that manage option and it will guide you through the process of what you want to do with your new drive, adding it to a new pool, replacing an old drive, using it as an expansion drive, hot swap and more. Now, again, when we looked earlier on about creating that new storage pool, we had the option there, but it still is quite intimidating and quite in your face compared with quite that nice, simple hand-holding action there from the Synology side. And again, that hand-holding action is fairly common throughout utilization of the whole system. If you were to go ahead and want to use the security advisor, for example, the security advisor of the Synology allows you to say that I want to use it for home or work, and then from there it will apply some of the security settings immediately with this wizard and manager to the system, and it will scan the whole system and let you know what settings need to be changed for your own security needs. Now, the Synology is already a much more closed system to start with. It supports less services overall. It supports a lot of the similar services to that of the TrueNAS, but it doesn't quite support as many when we look at some of the file services that are supported on the platform. And when we look at them, we go to file services, there's a lot of them, and they are configurable to quite a degree, but there's still not as many as the TrueNAS system. And if we look at the network area, there isn't really a network wizard built in to the TrueNAS platform. So again, a lot of this remote access stuff, a lot of setting up the device. Let's get the network protocol up there on screen. When it comes to setting up your network, things are very intimidating once you go into a lot of the network interface structure of the TrueNAS system there. And again, each of these options broken down there and broken down into the services action there. All of them have their own configuration that needs to be pursued, and there isn't really a wizard on hand to guide you through it. So again, that's something I kind of wished was there in terms of remote accessing your storage. And again, it can be something as simple as SMB and a map drive, or it could be something a lot more intensive, utilizing very unique and very specific sharing services over the network or remotely, like WebDAV, or using some of the more, OS specific ones for Mac and more. Now, as you can see there, it's already given me some warnings, but it's all still very chewable and very friendly, which I think some users are always just going to appreciate, to have a turnkey solution where most of the work is being done for you, and it just occasionally asks you a few questions on what it is you want it to do. Different users are intended for these setups and systems, but I will say that most of the options I've showed you thus far, even if you go to the most enterprise level Synology, are presented in a similar fashion to this. There are other options added, of course, and again, most of these are available on TrueNAS as well, such as high availability on the Synology platform there, such as deduplication in different areas of the system. Again, as soon as you bulk up on the Synology, a lot of those options become available. They're just, some of them might not be readily available to you on a more modest system like the DS920. And when I carry on looking down, we can talk a little bit about storage analyzing, where improvements can be made with on the Synology there. Again, that hand-holding thing continuing moving forward throughout. But when we talk about file sharing and we talk about remote access, we can talk a little bit there about creating SANs, creating those remote targets. Because you may have noticed that whereas on the TrueNAS, all of those sharing services and all of those remote access services are kind of put into two menus, on the Synology side, they're separated across different areas of the system. So you have to be very specific about the tool you're looking for, and then it will let you deep dive into how you want those to be set up, how you want them to be configured, accessible, backed up, redundancy, and more, all built in there. Whereas on the TrueNAS, it's kind of all presented in front of you at once to give you all of the options. And again, this brings me back again to having a wizard on there would have been quite useful, and having that search functionality at the top would also have made this a little bit easier there. Which brings me now onto the subject of applications and plugins. Now, a lot of people, when they buy their network attached storage device, they've got their RAID configuration sorted out, they've sorted out the little containers, the VDEVs, the volumes, whatever you want to call it, shared folders and more. They've done all of that. And now they want to kind of stretch their muscles a little bit and find out what they can do with their system, start connecting it with other services. Now, unsurprisingly, the Synology side of things is incredibly first party. As an off-the-shelf solution, it is its own ecosystem for the most part. TrueNAS, being more open source, is considerably more compatible with third-party services. If you go into the application center, there's a drop-down for IX systems and one for the community, and there is a wide variety of applications that are supported by third-party developers and have been modded by the community from third-party apps that allow you to install these tools inside your TrueNAS system and configure your storage from within the TrueNAS to be better suited and tailored to that end use. Now, Synology, on the other hand, although they do support some third-party development applications, it's also worth remembering that they support a community tab here with the Syno community, a third-party community support area where people make applications for Synology platform for different services and add-ons. And Synology have an enormous range of first-party applications ready and available straight away off the bat there. Now, these are myriad. There are so many of them. Earlier on, when I mentioned about the ability to access files via your web browser and the graphical user interface in a file folder breadcrumb structure there, as well as being able to share files and folders and tailor some of the access rights for individual users. I mean, from here, we can really go in deep because Synology have, over the course of the last 5 years, created their own versions of the majority of third-party applications being used right now across the board. So to put it into perspective, just looking at some of the list of first-party applications here, and I'm going to consult my notes to make sure I don't miss any. First and foremost, you've got Active Backup. Active Backup, for those that aren't aware, is, let's bring it up there. Active Backup allows you to connect multiple servers, multiple client computers, cloud-based SaaS software as a services, such as Google Workspace and Office 365 with the NAS, and integrate and backup as well, virtual environments as well, all within the system remotely. It is enormous. It is a premium product included with your system there. On top of that, after that, you've got Hyper Backup, your localized backup tool that allows you to create backup routines, again, between cloud containers, other NASes, to USB backups within the system, all to be conducted via that single portal. On top of that, you've got USB backup tools built into the system as well for either backing up in either direction, having versioning and stuff like that, all built in. Then you've got surveillance. They've got their own premium surveillance tool that allows you to access IP cameras directly from a graphical user interface, access a timeline. I have powered this system up for a while, so I won't be surprised if the cameras can't be seen. You can access multiple cameras from this user interface, add cameras on the fly. Again, you get 2 camera licenses and you have to pay for additional cameras, but still a nice application to have on there with a bunch of other add-on services, some of which are tailored to IP camera providers like Axis, all built in as well. On top of that, you've got photo, music, and video tailored applications, so you can access your video library, you can access your music library, you can access your photo library with AI photo recognition. Then after that, you've got cloud synchronization and mounting software that allows you to bolt on cloud service providers to be accessible and visible on your system. There's just so many. You've got an alternative to WhatsApp and Skype in Synology Chat, which is available for mobile desktops. So if you're a business user that wants to move over your entire communication operation, and that includes Synology Mail as well, taking over from Outlook and Google Drive and Google Mail and the like, and your in-house domain email. You've got Synology Drive, which is kind of a one portal access point comparable to Dropbox, Google Drive and more, and Synology Office as well, that allows you to open any file in your web browser via a single portal interface. You can go into the team folder, go into the shared folder, go into the Plex test there, go into photos, open up a photo, and you can open and share them from here as you see fit. All of that via the web browser, via that dedicated user interface, as well as allowing you to take advantage of the client application that will synchronize with multiple NAS, multiple computers, PCs and Macs, to synchronize with a single NAS in shared drive folders. You can even pin files and folders as well locally. I recommend checking out Synology Drive. It's an incredible piece of work there. Synology Calendar. But long story short, there are replacement tools for most of the third-party tools out there by Synology to create that ultimate single ecosystem. So when you're buying a Synology NAS, it is a true hardware-software solution there. Now, this is not to the detriment or any kind of negativity towards TrueNAS. They have clearly chosen the right tools for backing up, for command line tools, for home automation, for a lot of very tailored and assisted tools there. But there's no avoiding they are still third party, and will still require you to buy into multiple infrastructures at once. Now, if you're already using a number of these tools and services already, that's not going to be a big hardship. If you're only getting the NAS to use two or three very specific tasks, and you're building your TrueNAS, you're not going to need all of this bump here on the right hand side. You're going to want to use tailored applications. If you're going to be specifically looking at third-party apps like MB, Jellyfin, Plex Media Server, or running virtual machines that I'll touch on in a moment, all these little airy-fairy things I've mentioned are going to be fairly innocuous and useless to you. On the other hand, if you don't want to use Plex, for example, Synology's own alternative to Plex has metadata scraping, has transcoding, utilizing native stuff without buying a Plex pass, which is a premium. There's lots of good stuff all built in, and again, that goes for making your iTunes server as well. So you can't overlook the extra kind of services that are included with DSM, and if that's something you were looking at and getting a more complete first-party product, that's going to interest you. Now, I look at these apps here on the TrueNAS side, and there are lots more applications available to be downloaded online, but again, the same can be said for the Synology by adding things like the Syno community forum there, which allows you to add lots of apps that are being built all the time to make the most of your NAS to a higher degree. Now, TrueNAS counters a lot of that with the following things. Firstly, the system is tremendously API designed. So again, throughout the entire architecture of the system, its API backend is available pretty much consistently. So if you're going to be accessing your TrueNAS build with lots of remote services and you don't really want to trust it with root passwords and credentials that it might be detrimental, you can create API keys for pretty much anything. Now, a good number of elements of DSM can generate API keys or accept API keys, but TrueNAS is completely API key ready throughout. And a number of you who know what you're doing will definitely understand why that is such a definingly useful quality in the TrueNAS platform. On top of that, when it comes to virtual machines, and let's make our way in, the two brands have gone a very different way when it comes to virtual machine implementation. Synology have their own virtual machine tool there. You can import and export existing VMs onto the system. And again, that goes for hard drive images. If you're going to be using, I believe, VMDKs or VDKs, you can even port over different areas of storage for your virtual machines. And again, there is license limitations. I think you only get a certain degree of virtual machine coverage in Synology's platform before you have to go down the virtual route. And both platforms let you create virtual containers of their respective software and multiply them. But again, a little bit more licensing there on the Synology side. But when it comes to creating a virtual machine, there's a greater degree of customization and configuration on creating a virtual machine on the TrueNAS side than there is on the Synology side. The Synology side holds your hand a little bit. So like I can create a Microsoft Windows virtual machine. I haven't got an image to hand, but we're not going to go all the way to the desktop. Give it a name. Say how many cores we want, how much memory I want to use, visual card out stuff. And again, there'll be a little warning there. Again, right now, if I don't have the right visual assets, I can't run the VM. Give it 200 gig, click next. There's the guest tool, an optical disk that has drivers built in for a virtual machine. Add it to the network. And there you go. I'm now building the virtual machine there. Now, as easy and straightforward as that sounds, it does come with certain limitations that are just not present in the TrueNAS platform there. So, for example, in the TrueNAS platform, way more different platforms are supported in configuration. Also, on top of that, when it comes to creating a virtual machine on the TrueNAS platform, there's a wider degree. So if I go for a Windows option there, we'll call that one test. Again, from there, CPU limitations, you can come up with virtual CPUs. Also, because you're building a TrueNAS from the ground up, you get to pick the hardware you're going to use. You can put some real powerful hardware inside your system. And again, you can really break down and configure how much power you want your virtual machine to use and how it works. How much of its assets can be physical, how much of its assets can be hypothetically built out towards. So let's come out there of the Synology. You want to let that finish. Same goes if we go ahead, allocation, say where we want it to live. And again, just a lot more configuration options there all the way through on the virtual machine there on the TrueNAS platform. But again, it's that scalability and how much you can stretch the hardware and improve the hardware over time. When you're using a Synology product, you are kind of, that data, not data set, the pool and the volumes and the shared folders and everything you create is now contained within the Synology area there. You can't pull the drives out and stick them in another class of system. They can only work within a Synology, and you can migrate upwards. TrueNAS, although it will still need to work within TrueNAS, in some cases you can just pull them out and stick them into another RAID visible system. You can utilize them in another TrueNAS. You don't even need to emulate the same hardware CPU memory makeup. You can be incredibly bespoke, and its open source nature means if things change in your hardware environment in 5 to 10 years, you can still access all of that data. Another thing that's worth highlighting, at least to the detriment of the Synology platform, is to do a lot more with how data on your systems is accessed with regards to reports, with regards to resource monitoring and the health of your system as it runs over time. So in the case of the Synology, we sort of talked about it at the top of the video, but when you look at your CPU and memory utilization over time, you can break it down a little bit there. Look at the memory, network, disk utilization, volume. And again, even though I've enabled history usage, there's not a vast amount of history there in the past to go through. And if it was full, the way you're seeing it is largely all of what you'd see. You can produce logs in the log center there that will give you information about the system over time, all the way that's categorized over that. And again, you can use user-generated reports as well. But these reports are not exactly hyper-detailed. And that is because on the Synology side of things, even in the process manager, and we will talk about processes in a while, on the Synology side, they have a tool known as Active Insight. Now, Active Insight is a subscription-based platform within the Synology. You get a 30-day trial, but it gives you a huge amount of analytical information about individual drives, applications, information about the health of systems. You can take advantage of a CMS manager from within the Synology system that will give you a lot of information on the fly and allow remote access of your system, the central management there, which you can install. And again, that's quite useful, but this, I hate seagulls. Still, nonetheless, the best of the information gathering and resource details on the Synology side are at their best in the Active Insight tool, which is a subscription paid service. It's not hugely expensive, but it's still paid for per host. Now, if we look at the TrueNAS platform alternatively, and we go into the reporting there, we've already kind of touched on it earlier on, but it's so much more detailed, from historical information that we can zoom in and out of. We can break our way down into different areas, whether it's individual drives, so we can select and view all drives individually. We can break it down into look into different VDEVs and go down into the pools. From there, we can break it down into the system, whether we're utilizing how ZFS is performing on its own. Again, really useful detailed information, readily available and not behind a subscription wall there. And if we want, we can go ahead and find out more about if we want to generate user reports for end users as well, just to kind of say what's going on with our system at all times. So in the reporting area, to generate reports on the fly, so we can say we want CPU utilized information over the last month. At the graph point there, click save, and it will change a lot of that reporting information for us. So, and again, a lot of this information can be generated without being behind a paywall there. Now, there is a more elite level version of TrueNAS known as TrueNAS Command, and that is a subscription service, but still nonetheless, that really is more of an aggregation tool over multiple hardware services ready at your disposal. This still gives you more information on the fly and immediately accessible to you than you get from the Synology platform there without investing in the Active Insight side of things. Another thing that's worth highlighting while we're talking a lot more about when the system is in action is what happens when there's a process that we don't like. Actually, before I get onto that, let's talk about that CMS system, because it still does give you information about your server, as you're about to see. But this is more about controlling the server than it is about what the system is doing right now. And again, you can sort of configure a lot of things, but again, the CMS manager is at its best when it's being utilized across multiple Synology systems remotely, as the image shows. Now, going back, I mentioned processes there. So when the system's in operation, sometimes you might be wondering, why am I using too much CPU? Why am I using too much memory? And I'm pleased to say that you can break down into services and processes on the Synology, but, and this is an important point, I think, for a lot of users, even if you can see what's happening on the system at all times, you can't affect these. So you can't kill that process. Now, you can go in via SSH, and if you've enabled SSH and remote terminal, you can patch in and do it that way. But again, you're doing that with the system kind of advising you not to do such a thing too readily if you do want to play around with those settings there. Synology kind of hides a lot of those things away from you to not readily do them. You can do them and they may be beneficial to you by killing those processes, but the Synology doesn't go out of its way to allow you to do that too easily. Whereas on the TrueNAS platform, displaying those processes, you can kill and start changing those processes very, very easily from that desktop there. That's a big part of the architecture and design of TrueNAS, the ability to configure and change a lot of those options on the fly very, very easily. And once you kind of tack that in with a lot of that reporting of information that you can get via email, via direct notification, I think those two gel very, very well for more experienced tech enthusiasts that's going to know what they're doing, as well as accessing a lot of that command there. Also, when we're talking about services on the system and notifications, one thing I will add is, although getting notifications and updates from the system to maybe an admin or your tech guy are more diverse on the TrueNAS, I am not going to call them user-friendly. To put that into perspective, if you want to generate reports, not so much reports, alert services and alert settings on both of these systems, let me give you some idea of the distinction between them. So on the Synology platform there, and we have a little look at notifications, we can see that we can create email notifications based on different actions and different rules. So we can break it down quite substantially into different ones, and they're very specific to different tools for me there. So for example, I run a hyper backup, and I want to know if certain instances have occurred. I want to know if a backup has failed. I want to get information. I can choose which way I want to get it, and it's quite a long list, but it's broken down, I think, quite neatly into different tools that I'm using. And it's also worth highlighting that these only appear when you've added that application or service, or in some cases, such as system, where they're going to be unique. And obviously, regardless of the apps you use, they're going to be readily available. Now, I like this system of rules and notifications. I use it myself for two NASs that I use both for business and for pleasure. Now, in the case of the TrueNAS system, I think it lacks a little bit of that finesse. It is incredibly overwhelming. Yes, they've broken it down into individual areas. As you can see there, they're broken down into system, into storage, and more. But when I'm scrolling that wheel, this does not, like this, it's very easy to miss stuff there. I'm rolling that wheel there at quite a low DPI, and there's just so much information being thrown at me there. I can increase the frequency, and there's more elements of customization, as you expect. But it is very much a very intimidating viewpoint here. And definitely, if I'm looking for one specific alert, I don't have the search functionality. I don't have the means to find this very specific tailored alert that I might need. I might want to know that a specific backup has taken place, or a specific backup has errored. I might want to know that my storage configuration has hit a certain capacity. It's not readily available and visible to me to find there. And I think whenever I talk about these two platforms and how they present information to the end user and how the end user can customize their experience, one of the consistent elements that comes back time and time again is TrueNAS is going to be a little bit intimidating early doors. It's a very all-powerful experience. There's a lot to lean and learn early doors there. It is a more customizable experience. It is ultimately a more powerful experience, and you can build it. It's probably a more affordable experience as well, but it is still very much based on community. It is very much based on third-party support in some cases, and it is based on you, rather than investing your money sometimes, investing your time in learning and configuring and developing new skill sets. And if that interests you, the TrueNAS platform has everything you're ever going to need. It's by far the most customizable platform I've ever seen with all my years in storage. The Synology platform is always going to be the more user-friendly. It is a much more complete single ecosystem. It has a much easier user interface to take advantage of. Navigation is significantly more easier. It is easier to read, but it does this by being a little bit more closed in its architecture, and it needs to be in order to maintain that line, which again can often work to its favour, but also to its detriment from time to time. Arguments over BTRFS versus ZFS, I'm sure, will rage in the comments, and I think a lot of people who criticise Synology's use of BTRFS, one of the main criticisms people have the BTRFS on it is the structure and what BTRFS is built on. And if you look, you will see that BTRFS has been applied on the Synology in a slightly more unique way than people give credit for. It's still, for me, not as performance high as ZFS. It doesn't give the RAID abilities overall as ZFS, but at the same time, it does have triple parity support. SHR can allow you to attach 3 drives of parity, but it's not across each tier of SHR. It's not readily available on all of those. The applications, as good as some of them are, do have limitations in licensing. They do expect you eventually to go down that storage route of having subscription services on a system you've bought outright. There's also Synology's investment in the C2 platform, which is great if you intend to use it. But if you're already utilizing third-party SaaS services from Google or Microsoft, and you wanted to buy a bare metal solution to work with them, and you have a techie on hand or have the knowledge, you may well want to go for a TrueNAS. Ultimately, comparing these two platforms is more about your skill set than it is about their individual platforms. They're two of the best server softwares I've ever used, but there's no denying they have different end users in mind and different skill sets in mind, almost different organizations in mind. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Again, maybe it's already live, but if not, there should be an IX Systems versus Synology hardware video coming soon. We've already talked about the software today, and that it will be about hardware and flexibility. Thank you so much for watching. If you've enjoyed this video, we've got ones for other brands coming soon. I hope you enjoy those too. Click like if you did enjoy this video, subscribe if you want to learn more, and I will see you on the next video.